All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are on to the next section of notes. Week 2, we'll call it, week 2 of virtual learning. So here's how it's going to go. You're going to get an assignment to go with this, and I'm going to give you some examples that I think are probably plenty enough examples, including one from that's going to look similar to what you're going to see on the homework. And so I'm going to give you tables. If you look, we'll get to this in a minute, but I'm going to give you tables of -2, 0, 1, and 2, and then you're going to just fill in the points. I'll talk more about this specific format later, but for now, if you just want to look at, I'm giving you the numbers. I put some extra numbers on here for a reason. You'll see it. And all I'm doing is plugging each of these right here in for x. Here's the function it's saying. It wants us to compare it to x squared. This is the graph of x squared. And it wants us to compare it to see what's happening. What is this plus c doing? Okay. So I see this first one, and I'm going to plug in, again, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. That's my work right here, you can see. And -2 squared is 4, minus 2 is 2, of course. You can just do all of these in a calculator, of course. -1 squared is 1, minus 2 is -1. 0 minus 2 is -2. And it does kind of go as a reflection here through that point of that axis of symmetry. So actually, when I plug in 3 as well, just to give us some other numbers here, I'm going to get 7 for both -3 and 3. So again, plugging this in is how I got that. Plugging this in is how I got that. Plugging this in is how I got that, and so on. Just plugging it in there. Don't let this confuse you. That's just what y is. Okay. So I go graph these points. -2, 2 right there. -1, 1. Yeah, some of them are going to be pretty. Oh, sorry. -1, -1. Okay. 0, -2 down here, 1, -1, 2, 2, and just for laughs, I'm going to put 3, 7 up on this graph, and -3, 7 up on this graph. And what you'll see is, well, what? What do you see? You see the same graph, just shifted down 2 down. It's the same exact graph. It's just shifted down 2. Okay. If you remember, A, the number in front, kind of changes it whether it's thick or thin compared to the regular one. And when I put a C on it, well, that's what moves it up or down. So you can imagine this is probably going to move that graph down 5, but that negative is going to make it upside down. This is going to move the graph up 4, but this 1/2, and that's a little different from what you would see on these notes. It was 1/4 to begin with, but I like the number 1/2 a little better. Okay, we'll work on that in just a minute. Okay, so let's go on here and look at the next problem. So I've already given you a chart. When I plug in -2 squared is 4, and so this is plugged in like this: -2 squared minus 5. And order of operations, PEMDAS tells us parentheses, then exponents, then multiply. So this is 4 because it's -2 times -2. That makes it negative, and then minus 5 gives you -9. When I plug in -1 minus 5, it's going to be -6, -5, -6, and -9. It repeats itself. I go to graph this, and I'm going to see down at -2, -9, -1, -6, 0, -5, 1, -6, and 2, -9. And what you'll see here is, again, this is the same graph, but upside down and moved 5 units down. Right? So let's kind of see, I'll kind of bring that all together after we do this next one. When I plug in -2 I squared, I get 4 times half is 2 plus 4 is 6. When I plug in -1, that's not going to work out as nice. I'm going to get 1 times a half as a half plus 4 is 4.5. 0, I get 4, and then it repeats itself again. So when I go to do this graph, -2, 6 is way up here. -1, 4.5 is right in the middle right there, and then 0, 4, and then 4.5, and then this one again. And what you'll see here is it ends up moved up 4, and it becomes a little bit wider of a graph, because whenever this is a fraction, it makes it wider. Now look, up 4 is plus 4. Down 5 is minus 5. Down 2 is minus 2. So what this C is, this thing out here, what this number is doing, is it's moving our graph up or down. Simple as that, okay? And that's really what these notes at the top are saying as well. When C is greater than 0 when it's positive, it's a vertical translation up. When C is negative, right? When C is less than 0, it's negative, and it moves it down, okay? So that's that, okay? Now, as you look at what your homework is going to look like today, there's going to be 3 graphs. There's going to be 1, 2, 3 graphs. And all this is plug it into P. So when I plug in all these numbers in here, that's how I got 4, 1, 0, 1, and 4 with a vertex. When I plugged it in here, I went negative 2 squared, which is 4 plus 2. That's how I got 6. Right? That's what this is trying to show you. I don't like all this. This is just a little confusing, and it'll be like that on the homework. I'll show you that in a minute. And I plug in 1. 1 squared is 1 plus 2 is how I got 3, and so on. That's how I got this line. And then for d of x, I plugged in negative 2 squared. I get 4 times 2 is 8 minus 4 is how I got 4. And the rest of these numbers were, again, from plugging each of those numbers in for x for that function. So again, this is that. These are the pencil. And this is that first line. Okay. So when I go to graph these, and I actually think this might be a little bit easier to just show you on a graph, it's going to look like this. Right? This one was minus 4, so it moved it down 4. Right? This one wasn't plus or minus anything, so it stayed at 0. This one is plus 2, so it moved it up 2. And the first two are exactly the same. You can see how the red line is a little thinner. Well, again, that's because there's a number in front of A. Okay? Alright, so if that was a fraction, it would have made it wider. Okay, we've seen that too. Okay? On part B here, on number 2 here, excuse me, so again, this one that's blank, okay, what you can see is they're all negative, so they're all going to go down. The original one gives me the blue. This one moves that function 3 down, so look, 3 down, same graph. Okay, and then the red one moves it 5 up, but it's also going to make it skinnier because of that negative 2 out in front. And you can see it is thinner, and it was moved up 5. Okay? So that's how you're going to do the first couple of problems on your homework. Okay? Now, for the next part, I need to make sure I do, is there are problems on the back here that will, again, help you with your homework. But here's how it works. Okay? It's giving us the function right here. And don't let this mess you up. S sub 0, it says, is the initial height. So starting height is this S sub 0 right here. So if it's telling me that it's dropped from 64 feet, then that's what I plug in right there. Right? Now, it's also saying how many till it hits the ground. Well, think about it for a second. What height is the ground? Right? If you're standing up, you're 5 foot something because you're measured from the ground. Because the ground is height 0. Right? So I'm going to plug that in right here. So 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 64. And hopefully from chapter 1 of this year, you know how to solve this kind of a problem. I would first, if I'm solving it for t, I got to get rid of this plus 64 first. And it's always going to be the same steps, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, those will cancel. Negative 64 equals negative 16t squared. Okay. From there, then what? Okay, well, I got to get the t by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 16. And again, it is always the same steps. I get t squared equals 4. And hopefully you can recognize that the last step to get rid of a squared is to square root. I believe we did do that before you left. And I get t equals 2 seconds. Okay? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the correct answer. Okay? Alright, so let's do one. Again, how do I do that in my calculator? Well, I'm assuming that most of you don't have your calculator, so you've got a phone like me, right? So I'm going to go square root of 4, so I do the square root 4 equals, and there it gives me, right? Similarly, on the next problem, I've already written down the formula because I'm using the same formula it gave me, and I'm plugging in my initial value, which in this case, it tells me is a height of 144. And it says, again, the ground. Now, if it said how long till it would hit me in the head, maybe I would put 5'6" there, or whatever it is, okay? But it's not saying that. It's saying to the ground. The ground, again, is how I got height 0 here. I would do the same steps as before, minus 144 from both sides. And then next, again, after I did that, next was divide. Well, yep, that's divide. That's my next step. And I get, well, 9 equals t squared. And then I can square root that, which again I could do on my calculator. Hopefully most of you know that the square root of 9 is 3. I'm not giving you giant numbers here. And it's 3 seconds because it says after how many seconds. It's a story problem. I got to label it. Okay? All right. One more thing from, I got to find the right one here, from this assignment, because this is also going to be on your homework. Okay? Feel like I'm going to drop some stuff here. Bear with me here. All right. So down at the bottom of this worksheet here, and I will post these on Google Classroom, it's giving me this formula again. It's saying that it's launched at a velocity. It's saying a bunch of words that I don't want you to get confused. It just says find the height of the rocket at 1 second, 5 seconds, and 9 seconds. So t is my time. So for 1 second, which is what this is asking me to do, I just plugged in 1 into those t spots. For 5 seconds, I would just plug in 5 into those 2 spots. And for 9 seconds, again, I'm just going to plug 9 into there. So negative 16 times 9 squared plus 150 times 9. Okay. Now, when I go to plug that in, well, let's see. You can plug it in separately or all at one time. So I'm going to plug in this first one. Let's see. Negative 16 times, whoops, I got to close that parenthesis, sorry. Okay. Times, parentheses, negative 1, parentheses, squared. And most of your calculators will have just a squared button. If you want to do that x to the y button, that also means to the power of. But I'm just going to press squared. Okay? And then end my parentheses there. Plus 150 times parentheses 1. And it spits it out for me. It's 134. Okay? I got to make sure that that's right. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. 134. And then what's it asking for? Find the height in feet. So it's feet, right? Now, let's see here. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see if I can bring up my history. History. Let's see. So I'm going to do that same formula. I'm going to plug it. Oh, it just wants to give me the next thing. Let's see here. No, that's not what I wanted. I guess I'm just going to plug it in again. All right, so negative 16 parentheses times 5 squared, and then plus 150 times 5. And I get 350. All right, cool. So 350 feet. Now, could I just do this in a couple of steps? Look at this last one. I'm going to do this in a lot more steps, just in case some of your calculators aren't working. You can do order of operations here, which means negative 16 times 9 squared. So I would go 9 squared equals times negative 16 equals, and I get negative 1296 plus 150 times 9 equals 1350. And then I can just add those two. So plus negative 1296, and I get 54 feet. Okay. So multiple ways you can do those with a calculator. I'm trying to just use my phone because I know what most of you are. It's a lot easier if you have a normal calculator. But that is all the notes for this section today. We're going to be under about 15 minutes by the time I'm done. So let me just show you. Let's see here if I can find it. Losing my mind here. Just a second. What the homework is going to look like. Okay, it is 8.2b, and it's going to have everything you need. Okay, this is two-sided 8.2b. The back side is going to have these two problems here that you want. Okay, just like what we did earlier. So again, it's giving you a few values. Don't let this confuse you. Okay, when you're looking at this, basically again, for p of x, I'm going to plug numbers into here. So negative 1 squared is 1. 0 squared is 0. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of random ones. U of x, so u is this function right here. So when I plug in 1 into there, I have 1 squared plus 4 is 5. 2 squared is 4 plus 4 is 8, and so on. For d of x, I'm going to use this formula. I'm going to plug in negative 1 in here, and I would get 2 minus 8, which is negative 6. When I plug in 2 in here, I get 2 squared, which is 4, times 2 is 8 minus 8, which is 0, and so on. Okay, and then you will graph all 3 of those on this graph. Okay, I understand that you don't have graph paper if you can't print this. Maybe you're just giving yourself something that goes from negative 10 to 10 in each direction and plotting it that way. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just trying to get them all to fit on there so you can see what happens when you have minus 2 and plus 7, which you should know by now. For this next problem, minus 2 would mean it shifted down 2. Plus 7 would mean it shifted up 7, and so on, right? So that's those 2 problems. On the other side, it's going to be just like the problems we just got done with, right? Where you're setting them equal to 0. Okay, you're moving this by subtracting, you're dividing, and then you're square rooting. And it's the same steps over and over and over. So the first step is plug in 0. Second step is subtract constant. And when I say constant, that means the one without the letter, right? The number itself. So maybe I'll put that in parentheses, number. 3 is divide next to t squared. And the fourth step is to square root. Okay. All right, and so that's what you do on these problems. Don't let this confuse you. This h of t out here, when you're looking at this h of t, you could just scratch that off on all of these, right? Over and over, all the way down. I'm going to do it here too. Okay, and so you would just move the 16, you would divide, and then you square root for this one. It's telling you 256 feet in the air. So that's my 256 right here. And you'd move the 256, divide by the 16, and square root it. Okay, and it keeps going here. Now the only thing that's a little different here, let's see. Nope, nothing different. Actually, we'll just leave it all at that. Okay, and then down at the bottom of the page is those problems that we just got done doing. Okay, the ones at the bottom of that other worksheet, that's these problems where you're just plugging it into both of those spots and just plugging it into your calculator. That's all that is. Okay, and here, again, they've got 2 spots here. You would just plug it in. I'm going to show you at least how to do this. This means, for 3, I would go negative 16 times 3 squared, because I'm plugging in right there, plus 96 times 3, because I'm plugging it in right there. And then you just plug that into your calculator, okay? And then this little answer here. Okay? This is all we're doing this week. We are coming up on a quiz sooner or later here, but I'd say it's going to be a week or 2 before we get to that, okay? So 8.2b 1 through 2 on this page, and which will be 3 and 4 on that page, okay? All right, that is all for today. Have a great day.